Hey guys, hope you're having a great day today. My name is Daniel, and in this video I want to share with you the slow process that my CP3 pump went through before it finally died. We'll go ahead and get right into it. As we go through the autopsy of this CP3 pump and what kind of led finally to the final failure, it of course started with a check engine light, a code. Many of our parts are connected to the computer. The computer will tell us when things are outside of spec, above or below, whatever that looks like for that part. And this CP3 pump was no different. This pump triggered many different codes. It first started off with a low fuel rail pressure line. Basically, the fuel rail wasn't getting the proper PSI from this pump. It was triggering also all 6 injector codes, which may be scary, but ultimately, when we look at that, we generally know that most times that would happen. It's not all 6 injectors failing. Usually it's 1 or 2, maybe 3. That's what happened with my previous injectors in my RAM. I had 2, 3, and I believe 5 that failed. Not all 6 at one time, so it's a little fishy when all 6 go. So having 6 injector codes, 6 out of 6, and then also having the low fuel rail pressure sensor basically being triggered, that's a kind of a dead giveaway. It's not really the injectors. It's probably something earlier in the line, in the whole process of feeding the engine the fuel. So I first had engine codes. That was the first thing very, very early on. They were really kind of spaced out, and then they got more and more rapid as things happened. And so from there, as I would continue to get these engine codes, every once in a while I could erase it. It would come back, it would go off on its own. These engine codes were kind of intermittent throughout the whole process of the slow death. So that's kind of the first kind of trigger of seeing, okay, what am I seeing on my check engine light? Like what is happening with that? So that's number 1, is seeing these check engine lights pop up and go away, or you have to clear them. It's definitely the first thing that came up. If you happen to see the few videos that I made previously talking about the CP3 pump sensor on here, you would know kind of my journey with figuring out these fuel delivery issues that I have had. I have had the low pressure fuel pump, which is 15 to 20, 25 PSI, which ultimately feeds this pump so that this can then in turn crank it up to crazy, thousands PSI pressure. But it went from check engine lights and codes to ultimately this sensor failing. And so I made those previous videos talking about it. I replaced this sensor. This sensor was up to $300 if you wanted it that day from the auto parts store. I was able to find this for around $100 online. I was desperate, so I got the warranted, in-hand, auto parts store bought sensor. This was fairly easy to do. This was, I believe it was an Allen wrench, 3 bolts for this. Takes this off with the little electrical connector. I swapped it out. This is the replaced one, and I've had no other issues since then, and this corrected multiple other symptoms that I was having. This sensor failure was causing the symptoms of coming to a low RPM or coming to a stop at a stoplight, stop sign. It was causing me to either the truck would die or it would sputter. It would have, sometimes I'd put the pedal to the floor and nothing would happen. And it would take some time for it to recognize that, oh, I need to be sending more fuel to, from the pump to the rail line, and there was several issues with that. So this sensor had failed. It was causing a lot of issues, fuel delivery. I mean, it was the throttle response was low, several issues. When I replaced this sensor, pretty much all of those symptoms went away, besides the check engine light that would still come on intermittently. So again, that was a key factor throughout the whole process. But this sensor had failed at, I believe, what, over 500,000 miles, probably, you know, closer to 6. But this kind of bought me some time. Replacing this sensor, if you go back to that previous video and I walk through the whole thing, this kind of bought me some time before the ultimate failure was the pump itself. So in my experience, the sensor went first, and then the pump went after that sometime later. So I think it was probably still worth my money, but I replaced the sensor, and that was something that caused several other symptoms. Something else that was another symptom, part of the slow death of my CP3 pump, was longer and longer crank times when turning the key. Having a diesel truck, we should all be, you know, waiting for the glow plugs to clear, for everything to be properly primed, fuel, the glow plugs, everything, the grid heater, especially in the wintertime, all those kind of things. I would wait for that, and then I would crank it, and it would be 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and that became normal. That it was not just a put it to the on position, wait for everything to click off and everything to be primed, ready to go, and then crank it, and then vroom, you know. It was turning over, turning over, turning over, turning, boom, you know. So much throughout this whole process, a much longer crank time overall, which ultimately your starter, your batteries, things are affected by doing that longer crank time. So that was another theme throughout this whole process. And it's almost as if some of these things we don't notice it because it's such a slow process of the failure, of the death of a pump, of a part like this that is running at such a high efficiency, at a high rate, and it's almost like we don't notice it. But over time, I can look back and say, wow, what was I thinking? This was getting longer and longer. Like, these are the signs that were coming about for me. I should have been paying more attention and really thinking, okay, it's not just the sensor failing, you know, the check engine light. It's not just these other smaller things. The pump itself is struggling. Now, once it gets up to running and idling, no problem. I've got all of the power largely that I need, besides that other issue with the sensor. But these things were just a slow burn. It's like a slow cooker, okay? Eventually, you're like, wow, how did I get here? It's like the frog in the pot, you know, slowly turning it up, he's cooked. So that's exactly what happened with this. So that was another symptom, longer cranking time, more and more and more. Another piece to this puzzle was a slow throttle response. When I would be going at highway speeds, when I would be putting around town, there was a number of times where I would press on the gas and it's not delayed like a turbo lag. It's delayed like, I'm gonna get there, just give me a second. You know, it's the old man in the walker, you know, trying to cross the road. It's like, give me a few minutes, you know. That was kind of the effect that I was feeling. Again, kind of intermittently, more and more and more, which again, it's harder and harder to catch those things when they're so slowly getting worse. So a slow throttle response was definitely a factor, especially now that I have a new CP3 pump. There is, I mean, I'm getting immediate response, just completely different. I have it seems as if the engine is getting what it needs, so therefore it's as if I have a new engine, all due to a pump supplying the engine with what it actually needs. So throughout this process, We've got engine codes, we've got lack of response, we've got all sorts of lagging, slowing of different factors. We've got just kind of crazy symptoms, and bit by bit, you know, the list is really stacking up. I already replaced the sensor. I know this sensor is good. I don't think it went bad in, you know, less than a year. There's just a number of other things just really building up. So for this pump, the last thing that was just, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. The last thing was that my two batteries, we have a battery on the driver's side, battery on the passenger side. My understanding is the passenger side is the starter battery. And as I already said before, I had longer cranking time, more and more and more. Well, I would have expected in the winter time for it to be harder just in general, for the cold cranking amps to really give the engine and the whole system what it needs. However, it's 80, 90, 100 degrees, and it died in August, I believe. But the last part of the whole situation was it got to the point my batteries would take 2, almost 3 hours to start my truck. I was having to turn over the key to the on position and crank it, and obviously I'm not going to crank it for 20 minutes straight. I would crank it for 5, 10, 15 seconds, turn it off, let it rest. I'm not trying to blow anything up. I'm not trying to destroy my starter. I would do that multiple times. Well, when it's not getting what it needs, when it's not able to supply the engine with what it's supposed to get, you're going to drain your batteries. Both of them, I'm assuming, ultimately. And so that's what I would have to do. I would have to charge my batteries the night before starting this, the last few weeks of me really trying to just make it work and just buy myself some time. I would have to start charging, trickle charging the night before, and then I would try to crank it up to the jump position and try to jump my truck. And it was just destroying my batteries so much because I would crank it over. So I would have to do it so many times over and over and over again, and I would give time in between so I didn't, you know, overcook anything. But I had to do that so much, it destroyed my two other batteries. I had them both just tested recently. I bought brand new ones, and I finally brought the old ones in to get the core charge, and they were just gone. They were just deader than dead. So destroying the batteries, that longer crank time, having to, I mean, it really grenades the thing, you know, that's attached or directly connected to this. These things, whether it's in the fuel system or the power side, you could be just replacing one part, but rather, I don't know, my batteries were old, I'll give it that. You could be grenading other parts on your truck, other pieces that would not have died prematurely, but because you let one part go, you could be losing other parts, which cost lots of money. I paid $440 for 2 brand new batteries, and with the core charge, I think it was just under $400 when I got the refund for that. But there's a lot of symptoms that led to this slow death, and I in the end, I think I got my money's worth of this beast. 685, somewhere in there, 1,000 miles. I appreciate all the work that's given me. It's time to go be remanufactured or whatever. Next, I want to share with you kind of what I did, what my process was with this whole situation. I immediately, once I realized, okay, my batteries are toast, I was checking my OBD 2-port scanner. It was showing that I was not getting the 4,000 PSI that it needs to start the engine on my 6.7. Different years require more and more pressure, seemingly, PSI. I believe for my year, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 4,000. I think Ford requires even more, but 4,000 is the number for me, I think. And I was getting like 900, maybe 1,200, and that was it. And that's not enough to supply all 6 injectors to get what they need to then start the whole party. It just was not enough. So once I realized this is it, it is time, it's happening right now. I decided to go to rockauto.com. I found, my truck, and I've been there several times before, but went online, found a CP3 pump. I believe my new one is a remanufactured. It's got at least a 1 or 2 year warranty on it, and altogether it was $1,050. Now, thankfully, because I have this, there is a core charge that was a part of that. That was $375. So after shipping and everything that went involved into it, I'm only going to have to pay $700 for that CP3 pump that I bought from Rock Auto. I did have to wait a couple days. That also means I'm installing it, which is a whole other situation. I would only recommend if you really are handy and you're able to follow instructions on YouTube. There are several videos of it. I wouldn't dream of trying to do it because there's other people who have done an incredible job with it. Very easy to look up, to search. You'll be fine. But if you are in need of a new CP3 pump, there's lots of videos, and depending on your year, make, and model, and the whole thing, it can be not as bad as you might think for a CP3 pump. Of course, there's the whole shenanigans with the CP4 pump and all the trouble that can cause. I'm not going to even get into that. However, I just wanted to share with you about $700, 2 or 3 day shipping, I think it was. I went to a buddy's house. He definitely has a lot more tools than I do. I wanted to make sure that we were going to be okay. Went to his house, and there's actually 3 bolts. Just to talk through this a little bit with you, there's 3 bolts. There's one here on the side, I believe. Oh yeah, here, and then the bottom. So there's 3 bolts that go through. And if we're looking at this way, this is in front of the belt right here, and then this is the engine where I am at. So right here, I am basically injector 1, and this is right off there. So it's in front of the driver's side of your truck, and there's 1 electrical connector for the sensor here. I believe there's the 3 nuts that you have to take off for those 3 bolts that are on there. You do need a pusher tool to push this off. Literally, the tool is 2 bolts in 1 little steel little wedge, and basically you just tighten those, and it pushes the nose of this backward, and then you're able to pull it all up. It probably only should take, now that I've done it once and have a decent idea, it could probably take less than an hour. It took us a couple hours because I was nervous, because this is crazy high pressure. This is something that I can't afford to just, oops, I forgot that 1 step. So 3 nuts on the back, 1 electrical connector. There's a banjo bolt line here. There is the quick connect line that goes in here. And then I believe, is that it? I think that's it. Oh, and then a line here. So we've got, I believe, 1 feed line, 1 return line to the tank. And then I can't remember what the 3rd one's for. I don't know if that's feeding another part of the system, but basically the biggest factors for doing this job, if I can do it and not blow up my truck, probably most people could do it. Basically, in the videos that you watch online, they talk a lot about the numbers that are on this part here. There's a big nut that goes on here, and that's actually behind a rubber cap that goes right here that spins off. That rubber cap, I'm sorry, not rubber, it's plastic. A plastic cap, I would go ahead and just buy a brand new cap. because the old one's probably messed up or going to be by the time you get it off, which is, I destroyed mine, so I had a fuel leak. And basically you've got to get that cleaned up. But basically the two big things are making sure that the numbers right here are at 9 o'clock when you're facing it. So 9 o'clock on the west side of it, looking at it from the front of the engine bay, and then making sure that the nut is all the way on here. I don't remember what the torque spec was. I got it very tight. I got it very tight there, and then just making sure that this rubber O-ring doesn't get pinched when you're feeding this in to the setup. So with having those 3 posts that go through here, it can be fairly easy to line up, but we just want to make sure that this ring does not actually get pinched in the process. Otherwise, you'll have a leak at the front because you've got a plastic cap covering this whole thing. And then if you pinch this, which I did, which go figure, be smarter than me. If you pinch this at all and this has any issues, you'll have a leak on the back side. So you'll essentially have 2 leaks. They're very, very low pressure if you had that nut all the way on there and you had the 3 nuts on the back on there. It is safe to drive. I talked about that actually in the previous video that I made. I was having issues with that then, and essentially avoid that. Be extra careful, make sure the front cap is already replaced. You won't have those 2 leaks. It's simple, but this is not easy. If you have big fat fingers like I do, you're probably going to need somebody who's a little smaller of a hand to get into the back bottom here, going from underneath the truck, or if you can somehow move other things out of the way, which I didn't tear anything else apart on the truck. I simply just made it work. So the air intake going into the grid heater, I didn't take that off. That probably would have saved a whole bunch of other space. But this was the process that I went through, replacing this whole thing after all these symptoms, everything that happened. I believe $700. It probably could have avoided grenading my 2 other batteries. Probably they were older, but certainly by this winter they would have been toast. But I probably could have squeaked out a couple more months. So that kind of went into this whole situation. Losing the batteries, having leaks on both sides because of the cap, and then pinching this. It is what it is. I haven't damaged the pump in any other way. It just has it had a small fuel leak in those areas. I'm going to be returning this. I've waited to make this video because I'm constantly running around, but this is going to be $375 back to me as I send it back to Rock Auto for the core charge. So it really will be down to $700 of a cost after I get this returned back to them. So if at all possible, try to preemptively, if you think of any of these symptoms that I've had that you're starting to see or you have seen and they're creeping up on you, if you can save some money, do it yourself. Buy online. Do it with a couple buddies. Somebody who has smaller hands than this. You're going to be in a better position than I was. This sort of caught me off guard, sort of didn't. Kind of kicking myself for not getting this addressed quicker. So this was my CP3 pump failure, the slow death situation that I went through. It's nerve-wracking, it's annoying, trying to start your truck, and it literally, because of your batteries being drained so badly, it taking an hour to almost 3 hours for the batteries to be jump-started, and I mean, just, it just turned into a nightmare. That was just so ridiculous. Looking back, I probably should have taken action quicker. But I didn't. So I'm sharing this video with you to hopefully your next time when you would go through this, you're faster, you're more efficient with it. You don't make the silly mistakes that I have made doing this. I'm not a mechanic. I know enough to be dangerous because I've been dangerous with my own stuff and fought through it and figured it out and had to replace things. And I just try to share what I've learned. And as I make a mess, I can share the highlights with you, and just to be a help. So anyways, hopefully this was actually a help to you, talking about the CP3 pump. If you're having some of these symptoms, start looking, start finding some options, whether you have somebody else do it or you do it. Start looking into those videos online of how to replace it. Maybe it'll take the sting or the fear out of you actually getting hands-on and just going at it. I think you could, even with another person who neither of you know what you're doing. These were not difficult things to do, or I'm sorry, these were not complicated things. They're just simple but challenging. So anyways, hopefully this was a help to you. Have a great day, guys. Stay safe and God bless.